Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that has now featured on the channel a good number of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last 2 or 3 years, and this brewery have made their name when it comes to the New England hazy IPAs. So if you're into that style, this is definitely one of the Swedish breweries that you want to keep an eye on. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to a little place called Nora to the north of Örebro, out to the west of Stockholm, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Apex Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called the Orcus. It comes in at 6.5% ABV and is yet another one of those signature New England hazy IPAs. So yeah, very curious to see how this one turns out. This beer was released as part of the local Småskalig assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for May of 2021. The exact release date for this one, I believe, was the 1st of May, but it was released a few weeks prior on Glassbanken and a few other websites actually. But yeah, always cool to review the new beers from Apex Brewing Company. I'm curious to see how it turns out, so hopefully you guys enjoy my take on this beer as well. So yeah, let's see how we get on with this one then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Apex Brewing Company before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list in the near future. I do keep an eye on the beers that these guys are releasing, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Apex Brewing Company then, on to my brewery notes. So Apex Brewing Company, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in a little place called Nora to the north of Örebro, out to the west of Stockholm, and this brewery was founded back in 2017 by Daniel Gatchitz and Niklas Lundgren. So both of these guys are musicians. Niklas played in the band 59 Times the Pain, while Daniel played in Voice of a Generation, but they're also into their brewing these days. So Daniel and Niklas are responsible for the brewing operations at the company, but there are a few others involved in there as well. So that's Leif Karlsson, Ola Eriksson and Roger Hjelm. But these guys started off with quite a modest 500 litre brew kit and 6 fermentation tanks, and they were just selling their beer in the very local area before they got them into Systembolaget and then distributed nationwide. I believe my first review from these guys came in 2018 at some point, and that was the single hop IPA, and that was a very nice beer in fact. But in 2018 they produced around 35,000 litres of beer, and about 25 different varieties were produced that year as well, all of which were New England hazy type IPAs. And then the following year in 2019 they brewed around 120,000 litres. That was when their sales really started to ramp up. I believe that over the course of 2020 they've increased that capacity even further, and they are going to expand even more over 2021, but I couldn't find an exact figure for how much they are brewing these days. But they've also started exporting their beer. I know that some of these have made their way over to like Scotland and Sweden, Scotland and England, sorry, and places like that. And I think some of them have gone down to Germany and stuff as well. I'm sure I've had some German viewers telling me that they've tried some of these beers as well. But yeah, as of May 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 70 different kinds of beers, mostly New England hazy IPAs, as I've told you already, session IPAs, singles, doubles, triples and stuff like this. But I have noticed over the last kind of 2 or 3 months, they have been producing a couple of lager beers actually, so I look forward to trying those on the channel at some point soon. I really hope I can get a hold of those at some stage over the summer, but I would love to see these guys do a black IPA and an old school West Coast IPA. I think that could be a really interesting project for Apex Brewing going forward, but it is nice to see them starting to diversify what they're doing a little bit. But as I say, if you're into your New England hazies, this is definitely one of the Swedish breweries that you want to check out actually. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Apex Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer their Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and actually have a taste of this beer then and see how we go. So yeah, let you have a little look at the artwork before we open it up. As you can see, it has the standard Apex sort of Illuminati style stuff on it, and you've got the animal there as well. So this one, of course, is a koala. Like I said earlier, the beer comes in at 6.5% ABV. I believe this one cost me somewhere in the region of 45 Swedish kronor, which is pretty standard for a sort of 6.5%, or, you know, a single New England IPA. So yeah, 45 Swedish kroners, that translates to roughly €4.50, £4 sterling, and I guess somewhere in the region of $5.50 American, just to give those of you watching abroad a little bit of a price range. But yeah, that is the standard price of a sort of New England hazy IPA these days. I think a West Coaster will cost you pretty much the same, to be honest with you. But yeah, looks very nice, nicely presented as you always get from Apex Brewing Company. But yeah, 6.5% New England IPA. The profile of this beer, which you can always get on Untappd from these guys incidentally, this one is hopped with Cashmere, Simcoe and Citra, and it's got a malt base of Maris Otter Extra Pale, Flaked Wheat and Torrefied Oats. So it's a little bit of a simpler malt base in this one compared to some of the other ones we've had before, but it uses their kind of almost signature WLP 66 London fog yeast. So yeah, this should be quite interesting. I've had a lot of beers with Cashmere, Simcoe and Citra. I don't know if I've had that exact combination before right enough, but I do certainly like all those hops. Cashmere in particular is a very, very interesting hop, about 14-15% alpha acid, lovely big melony notes, a lot of lemon and lime as well. You know, it does some really interesting things with these sort of London fog yeast as well, so I'm curious to see if that translates into this beer. But then Citra we know quite well, 14% alpha acid, American hop as well, lovely big juicy mangoey notes with a good bit of a kind of citrusy backbone to it. And then Simcoe, about 12% alpha acid, lovely soft passion fruity notes in a New England IPA like this, and you know, quite a straight shooting hop for me, that one. But yeah, this one I think should be a really interesting beer. So now that we've got it out and into the glass, as you can see, it's poured pretty much as you would expect from a New England IPA. You can see that the head on this one is about 2/3 of a finger. It's got a frothy, perfect white head, one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass as well, and a few little ones going up towards the bottom of that head. But yeah, there are one or two bigger bubbles sitting around the edge of the glass there. But in terms of colour, if we shine the light through this one, it's got a lovely, very bright, very rich kind of mangoey yellow colour to it. It looks absolutely lovely. In terms of the level of haze for this beer, I'd say, you know, it's fairly kind of standard actually. So remember, when it comes to the colour of these New England IPAs, or any beer pretty much for that matter, it depends on one, the type of malts that you use. They decide the magnitude of the colour in the first instance, and then the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role as well, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar caramelizes, thus you get a darker colour of beer. And any adjuncts and barrel aging that you do have the potential to affect the colour of the beer as well. When it comes to the New England IPAs, the level of haze that you get out of these is determined by the oat and the wheat content. The yeast can play a role as well, but that varies from brewery to brewery because it's all to do with the kind of ratio and things. But in terms of a 6.5%er, the level of haze on this one is fairly decent actually. I think it's one of the hazier 6.5%ers I've come across in recent times, but certainly not the soupiest and gloopiest that I've come across at this alcohol percentage. But yeah, good level of haze to this one. But in terms of appearance, as I say, it looks exactly as you would expect from a New England hazy type IPA. So yeah, I guess we can take a closer look at the aroma and just see how we get on with this one. I think this should be a very nice beer. So yeah, it's got that sort of signature Apex brewing kind of feel to it. So these Apex Brewing Company beers, they always have a little bit of this kind of farmhousey vibe about them when you smell them, but it's very rare that that actually translates into the flavour. Normally these beers are just big, very, very smooth, and almost, it can vary from beer to beer of course, because they've got different malt bases. They do like to kind of play around with the malt bases in these beers, which is quite nice actually. But yeah, that's one of my books falling off. But there we go. But yeah, they do like to play around with the different malt bases at Apex Brewing, which kind of keeps things a little bit lively. But certainly with this beer, as soon as you go into it, you get a little bit of that sort of farmhousey, kind of slightly woody, crackery grainy sort of thing coming out of this beer, and that's one of the signature things that you'll get from Apex Brewing Company. Regardless of how strong your IPA is, you're always going to get that out of one of these. So yeah, you pick that up right away. So a little bit of a slightly woody backbone to it, a little bit of a kind of Jacob's cream crackery sort of thing, and a wee bit of that kind of yeasty kind of fluffiness and a bit of grainy cap quality in there. But at the same time, you get a nice level of bitiness out of the wheat with this beer. You can smell a little bit of that bitey wheat at the back of your nose, but you've got a lovely soft fresh white bread coming out of this one, which I think works very well. Lovely soft kind of white bready note in there. You do get a little touch of bread crust out of this beer the more that you drink of it, which I really like as well. Yeah, big soft white bready element out of this one. You do get a bit of the smoothness of the oats coming out of the beer too, but this one for me overall, I think this one's got a few different things going on. As I've told you in previous reviews, personally I would say that the New England hazies can lean in quite a few different ways. You know, there's 6 different directions to take this beer in my opinion. They can be sort of yeasty and farmhousey, they can be kind of rye leaning and grainy, they can be wheaty and bitey, oaty and creamy, barley malt leaning and bready, and I guess you can also say sort of brown sugary leaning as well actually. But quite often they will display a few different characteristics. So for me in the aroma, this one, it has a wee bit of the farmhousey thing, it's got a good little bit of bitey wheat, you've got a kind of white bready barley malt type thing coming out of this one, which is great. That'll be the Maris Otter extra pale of course. And then you do, the more you smell of this one, you do get a little bit of the oaty smoothness, but for me the oats don't make this beer smell particularly thick or anything like that. It just sort of smooths it out and just gives it a wee tiny touch of sweetness. You do also get a little bit of that sort of Werther's Original kind of butter candy type brown sugar out of this beer, but again that's quite minimal. But yeah, the aroma of this beer I think goes together really quite well actually. It smells like pretty much a signature Apex Brewing Company beer from the malty side of things, and for me it's always the malt base that would give the beers away from this brewery if I was smelling them blind. So yeah, it is quite interesting to think about these little things. I always say this is why you always take a bit of time to ponder over the aroma. It's always half the experience with craft beer. But let's focus on the hoppy side of things then. It is an IPA after all. So yeah, for me there's definitely a wee touch of a kind of earthiness out of this one. You do get a little bit of that of course. But for me, big green component to this beer. Lovely, big, very bright floral aromaticity. I wouldn't describe it as being spicy, to be honest with you, but you do get a little bit of a kind of grassy zestiness coming off the beer, which I can certainly appreciate. So I do like that about this one, absolutely. So yeah, the green component for me really leans towards that big, bright floral side of things. But as I say, there's a little bit of a grassy kind of zesty quality coming out of the beer. So it certainly works very nicely in that sense. So yeah, that builds a good bridge with the slight wheaty bitiness that this beer has in the back of the nose too. But on the fruity side of things, what you will find is that this is quite a citrusy, zesty leaning beer, this one. So let's just examine those fruits a little bit more in depth and then we'll get on with the tasting. So yeah, for me, you can definitely smell the influence of the Citra and the Simcoe in this one. So you get a wee touch of a kind of more pungent passion fruit there. That'll be the Citra that's giving you that, of course, and for the more pungent note. But then you get the softer, more mellow passion fruit from the Simcoe, and at the same time a wee bit of a more oily kind of mango there. But then the beer really starts to lean towards those more citrusy notes. You can smell the melon in this one. The cashmere has that really distinctive melony note to it. But then on the very tip of the nose, just behind the grassy notes, you're kind of getting that more you get a bit of the kind of darker lime underneath, but you get that really sort of zesty lemon. And again, that's one of the signatures of cashmere. It has it's got a big kind of bright melon note to it. It's got a little bit of a darker lime, but then a very zesty lemon as well. And remember, Citra will contribute to these as well. I'd love to see what cashmere and Centennial could do together. That could be a very interesting combination just from the sheer power of the zestiness, but that's another thought. But yeah, lovely little bit of tropical notes in the backbone there, but to me this smells like a more kind of citrusy leaning New England IPA from the fruity side of things, I would say. But it does have a fair wee bit of wetness and juiciness on the aroma to the fruity side of things as well. So yeah, just take a bit of time, as I say, and ponder over the aroma of this one. This one has a little bit of a different vibe to it compared to some of the other ones. we've had from Apex Brewing Company before in terms of the fruitiness, but otherwise it's quite similar to some of the other ones. So yeah, I think it's about time that we have a taste of this one then. So as I always say, take a bit of time to ponder over the aroma of this beer before you get stuck into it, but I think it is about time that we had a taste of this one then. So yeah, this is the Orcus IPA coming in at 6.5% ABV from Apex Brewing Company in Nora near Örebro here in Sweden. Let's get stuck into this one. Slange, skål, cheers. Oh yeah. Nothing wrong with the beer, nothing wrong with that, just throat's a little bit dry because I've been doing some tutoring today, so yeah, voice is a little bit sore actually. But yeah, this beer is kind of exactly as I thought it was going to be because of the big, it's got a big citrusy bite to it as soon as you take it in, so yeah. Yeah, you know, you can just tell straight away this is just it's one of these typical Apex ones, but like I said, just a more citrusy, bitey version of what we've had before. I'm trying to remember what IPA it was we had last month actually. If it was a double IPA, I think the most recent beer I had from these guys was actually the Carnifex, which was a triple, and that thing was a beast. That was a very, very nice beer. But I think the last regular IPA we had from these guys might have been a single IPA as well, come to think of it. So yeah, that was interesting. But yeah, this one definitely strikes me as being a little bit more kind of citrusy and things like that. And the malt base comes across in the flavour as well as being a little bit more straight shooting too. So this is quite a wee bit different from what we've had from Apex Brewing Company before. So yeah. So, where do we start with this one then? I'm going to say straight away, I like this. I wouldn't hesitate to drink it again, but we know that Apex, of course, are very, very capable when it comes to these New England IPAs. But yeah, so straight away across the middle of your palate with this beer, then you can feel a little bit of a sort of graininess that just forms the very backbone of the beer. But sitting on top of that, or if you go towards the front half of that middle third of your tongue, you can feel there is a little bit of there is a little touch of a kind of woody undertone to this one, which is kind of interesting there. But yeah, as I say, quite a wee bit of graininess there. But the further you go into the aftertaste with this beer, you can feel there's a soft, white bready, barley malt character coming out of this one, and that's your Maris Otter Extra Pale. But it doesn't feel madly fluffy, to be honest with you. I do wonder if it's the Maris Otter that's given this beer just a little bit of a kind of extra grainy note to it. So yeah, say quite a straight shooting malt base across the middle third of your palate there. But if you go down the sort of middle line of your tongue, you can feel a nice line of a sort of smooth oaty quality there. And the oats in this one don't come across as being overly thick. They do have a little bit of that slightly drier quality to them. But I think that works in this beer's favour, to be quite honest. So yeah, it's pretty damn solid, I have to say, this from the malty side of things, but quite straight shooting. Definitely not as complex as some of the other ones we've had recently, but remember, my palate might be a little bit skewed from from having the Carnifex, the triple IPA, in the last review we did from these guys. So yeah. But yeah, the malt base does take a wee bit of time to kind of open up a little bit, but as I say, the further you go into the aftertaste with this, there's a little bit more of the woodiness comes out, and the graininess, you know, the graininess kind of sticks in with this one as well. It does, the graininess maintains a little bit of that pungency, but yeah, grainy backbone, a little bit of woodiness on that front half of the middle third of your palate, and on top of both of these things, you get more of a kind of, you get like a sort of white bready quality in there, which is quite interesting. But it doesn't feel like a madly thick white bread, to be quite honest with you. At either end of that middle third of your palate as well, you get a wee bit more of a kind of bread crusty quality, and then down the middle line of your palate, you can feel that nice sort of smooth, slightly drier oaty kind of thing. But in the very dead centre of your palate, you can feel there's a little circle there. You can feel that there's just a little circle to this one, and that's where you get that sort of Werther's Original butter candy type note out of the beer. That's the wee bit of the brown sugar. That's the alcohol flavour coming out of this one, and that will be a little bit from the Maris Otter. And as you move further out towards the edge of the palate, you will get one or two little kind of biscuity remnants there, and for me that's one of the signatures of Maris Otter malt. It's just that little touch of kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity thing it has. So yeah, I quite like the malt base in this one, fair to say. So yeah, that covers the middle third of your palate. Let's look at the other parts of the palate for this one. So yeah, the border region between middle third and back third of your palate with this beer, you've got a nice, you do get a little bit of a kind of bready build up to this one, a wee bit of a kind of bread crusty element as well. So yeah, that's the kind of border region in the middle of the palate there. But as you move into that back third of your palate, it's interesting because you can feel a little bit more of the graininess in there and a bit of the bitiness from the wheat. The wheat does actually have a fair wee bit of bite to it, which I like. But just sitting on top of that back third of your tongue, you can feel there's a little bit of an airy kind of yeasty quality coming out of this beer, which I certainly like. So yeah, you can feel those yeasty esters making the flavour just a little bit taller in the back part of the palate. So yeah, you've got that nice airy, doughy bread kind of thing from some of the yeasty stuff in there. So yeah, when you start at the back of the palate, the flavour is kind of like that. So you've got the bitey wheat underneath. As you move further forward, it gets gradually more grainy. But yeah, as you progress forward on the palate, the flavour just gradually condenses down, and then as you go into the middle third of your palate, it is quite squashed together, and it feels almost crisp in a sense, which is quite interesting. But yeah, that covers the malty and yeasty side of your beer. So let's focus on the hops. Back corners of the palate, for me, there is a little touch of earthiness there, and you'll always get some earthy qualities from these different hops. But yeah, a little touch of earthiness in there. As you move further forward, it's got a wee bit of the earthiness does spread forward a little bit. Then you start to get the more pungent, floral, aromatic notes out of the beer, and it does actually feel, you know, this beer, the green component does have a little bit of spiciness to it, which is kind of interesting, which would make me wonder if there is a little bit of Columbus in here as a bittering hop. But remember, all of these hops, if you add them early enough in the wort boil, they are capable of giving you a bit of that kind of big green spicy bitterness. So a New England IPA, of course, is more relying on late addition hops, and when you add the hops late on in the wort boil, that's when you get more flavour and aroma. If you add them early on in the boil, that's when you get the big bitter notes out of them. So yeah, bear that in mind when you get when you think about these IPAs. So yeah, you do get a bit of that big green bitter spicy note out of this beer. It's not madly bitter, this one, but we'll come to that in the mouthfeel. But it does have a little bit of that underlying sort of spicy green quality to it, but at the same time you get some nice brighter floral notes there. But yeah, round the front curve of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of a kind of grassy quality to this one, and it does have a fair wee bit of zestiness to it. Like I said, this is one of the signatures that you'll get from the Cashmere hops, so you can pick that up out of this one right away. As I say, Cashmere, it's such a distinctive hop. If you haven't had a Cashmere beer already, I really would recommend that you take a look at some Cashmere hopped beers, because there's no other hop that's got that kind of big citrusy zest, at least that I found. You know, you could argue Centennial does, but you know, I would say Centennial is more of a kind of straight shooting lemon. You know, the Cascade is, you know, how do you say, Cashmere is just a little bit more kind of unique in that sense, I would say, for sure. But yeah, I think that covers the green component of the beer. For me, nice big floral note. It's got a wee touch of a spicy element to it, but a good grassy, zesty quality coming out of this as well. But let's focus on the kind of fruity side of the beer. So border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you do get a little bit of that kind of bready build up in there. There's a wee bit of a kind of graininess coming out of it as well. You can feel that in there too. But then the base of that front third of your palate, again, you can feel wee touch of graininess in there, and some of that, what I suspect is the Maris Otter pale malt, that sort of slightly more crisp white bread. The more that you drink of this beer, the more the kind of crisp, the white bready notes seem to get out of it, so that's worth remembering as well. But as I always say, on that front third of your palate, that's where you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. So let's focus on those fruity esters now. So as I say, when you take this beer in, you do get quite a little bit of a zesty bite out of this one, but if you go to the back of that front third of your palate, you get a wee touch of a pungent passion fruit, that's the Citra. As you move further forward, you'll get the more mellow passion fruits from the Simcoe, of course, and then as you reach the kind of midpoint on that middle third of your palate, it's a more kind of oily-ish mango quality that you're getting out of the beer, and again, that's the Citra. But as you move into that front half of the front third, then that's when you get the big zesty quality out of the beer. It's all about that big citrusy zest in this one. So straight away it kind of switches to like a melon note. It's cashmere all the way, but then and the melon kind of lingers there, but as you move just towards the very tip of your palate, there's a nice sort of big lemony sharpness to this one. You can feel that, but there is a bit of the darker lime just kind of sitting underneath. So yeah, big sort of lemony zestiness in there, a bit of a limey darkness to it, and yeah, it fits together very, very well, this one. So yeah, I do like how this beer goes together. As I say, it's the cashmere kind of dominates this one, and that is one of the things that's giving me a bit of gas, this. But yeah, that's one of the things you risk with cashmere a little bit, is that it can dominate a beer. It's not doing it too badly in this one, as I would say, but you know, it is cashmere. If you use that, it is a little bit like a napalm blanket in a sense for the citrusy zestiness. You can get that, but you do get wee elements of the tropical character there. But the melon, you do get that big distinctive melony note out of cashmere. As I say, a darker lime, but still quite a bright lemony bite to the beer as well. So yeah, that really takes over the fruity side of the beer the further you go into the aftertaste as well. So just be prepared. This is a little bit more of a kind of citrusy zesty bite compared to other Apex beers that you might have had before. But I like it. It does get a thumbs up from me. Like I say, it's nice to have beers that take a little bit of a different approach, for sure. My brain's a bit tired today, been working all day on stuff. But yeah, on the mouthfeel side of things, then I think we've covered the flavour profile of this beer quite in depth now. Let's round off with the mouthfeel. Overall, I would say it's right in the middle of the spectrum. The carbonation is very, very smooth on this one. You do get an element of the kind of cleanliness out of the beer that you would expect from any Nordic beer. But yeah, a nice little bit of smoothness as you would want from a New England IPA as well. In terms of hoppy bitterness, what can we say about this one? So yeah, in terms of hoppy bitterness, it's I think it's a fairly standard sort of 30 IBU beer. This one, it did feel a little bit more kind of spicy earlier on, but it's sort of mellowed out a little bit. You've got a nice kind of smoothness to the malt base there. You get a wee bit of sweetness out of it later on, just from a wee bit of the oats and a wee bit of that kind of Werther's Original brown sugar thing I said. But yeah, a little bit of dryness from the oat, a little bit of a graininess as well. It's kind of it has a fair wee bit of yeasty character to it as well. You do get a wee bit of dryness out of the malt base of this beer the further you go into it. But yeah, good little bit of floral spiciness, and as I said earlier, the fruity side of things really leans towards that kind of citrusy, zesty kind of thing. So yeah, I feel this review's been a little bit of a ramble in a way, so I do apologise for that if it's been the case, because my brain's just a little bit tired. But yeah, another very, very solid beer from Apex Brewing Company. I think we can leave it at that for here. This one was the Orcus IPA, 6.5% New England IPA, their signature style, from Apex Brewing Company in Nora, near Örebro here in Sweden. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Apex Brewing. We will no doubt return to these guys at some point in the near future. I usually try the beers that they're releasing every month. But thank you again for watching. Check out my social media. Check out Apex Brewing Company, particularly if you like your New England hazy IPAs. But Slàinte just now, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Slàinte, skull, cheers. Make sure you check out this brewery.